Okay, so here's an interesting video. This is by Lucky Ghost, saying that solo players saved the MMORPG genre. Now, one of the interesting things about this is that I saw this video, saved it to this playlist. I don't know, this was almost like a week ago or something because I haven't been able to stream as much as I wanted to. And then recently I saw that Asmongold actually already reacted to it. I haven't seen his reaction to it, but I'm curious to see what this is about. This guy also had another video that he did, which is how I became aware of his channel. I forget what the other video was about, but it was a really good video about MMOs as well. Let me very quickly check his channel. It's like there was another video that I watched from him that I thought was really good. It was it this one? How every MMORPG is dying? Yeah, I think it was this one. Why is every MMO dying except this one? And this video, like halfway, basically transforms into, here's why Final Fantasy XIV is so awesome. And I thought that was really cool. But yeah, it's a good video. You guys should check it out. But anyways, let's check this one out. Soloable MMO, solo players save the genre. Let's see what Lucky Ghost has to say.
Hey guys, it's Lucky here, and today we're going to talk about something interesting. I'm making this video because I realized something. Most of us are loners. Most of us don't have someone to play our favorite MMO with when we log in every day, but we keep coming back in spite of that. And even if we do have someone to play with, sometimes we just want to play alone. Take a look at Asmongold, who started his YouTube channel 8 years ago, teaching people how to solo group content.
What's up, y'all? It's your boy Asmongold. I'm going to show y'all how to solo Conclave of Wind. What's up, y'all? It's your boy Asmongold, and today we're continuing the series on how to solo Glory of the Cataclysm Hero. What's up, y'all? It's your boy Asmongold, and today I'm going to show y'all how to solo List Resort as a warrior.
And even those of us that do have friends have a hard time agreeing with those friends on what MMO to play and when, resulting on the people that do have friends also playing MMOs alone. This was made more apparent than ever when I tossed up a video on YouTube about MMOs that you can play alone or without friends, and it absolutely blew up. You guys devoured this thing, shedding some light on the fact that, hey, a lot of us spend most of our time playing MMOs solo, and we recognize that. MMORPGs are more and more turning into RPGs that happen to be online. Is it the develop?
I think one of the things about playing MMORPGs, or even just like, sometimes it doesn't even have to be an MMORPG. It can be like an RPG that has co-op. It's not necessarily about whether you play with multiplayers or in multiplayer, whether you play solo. It's about you being able to show your friends the accomplishments of what you've done, I feel like. You know? Because there's always the chance that your friends can join you and you can all go have fun together, but you can kind of like show the progress that you've done. And due to the fact that it is in a multiplayer environment, that progress has more value, I feel, than a single player game in a lot of situations. But yeah, it's a weird concept, I feel like, to try and explain, but there's definitely something about the social aspect of it gives more validity to the things that you've achieved. It's actually interesting because I have a lot of friends I play with from overseas, and sometimes the experience is just terrible when you try to play them together. So I find myself going into some of those games I want to play on my own. Yeah, there's something about MMORPGs where it's like, if you have the perfect setup, and the perfect setup would be like, you know, you and your friends having, you know, free time at around the same time, and you get together and you play. Because what always ends up happening is you have those friends that, you know, they forge ahead. They get ahead of you significantly, and then it's hard to play with them because they're doing content that is no longer for your level, right? And it's just hard to sync everybody up on an MMORPG. It's hard to get people synced up in a way that everybody is playing at the same level, doing the same difficulty, and doing content that is both fulfilling and satisfying for all parties involved, which is something that MMORPGs need to work on. I feel like Guild Wars 2 does a bit of a better job of that in the open world, at least, where you can be doing something and a friend can join you and you can all go have fun doing that activity. Whereas a lot of other MMOs, they just don't have as much. Like in 14, you get synced down and you can go do dungeons and old raids and stuff like that with your friends. And there is the potential for that to be fun, but it is limiting to some extent. Usually people want to get to the end game and actually do the end game together. So, you know, it's one of those things where ideally everybody would be able to engage in something that everybody can have fun with. But in reality, very rarely does that happen while people are going through the leveling process. Only at end game do people start syncing up because progression slows down.
Developers implementing it, or is it us demanding it? Why is it that most players today log into their massively multiplayer game and spend the majority of their time playing alone? These are all interesting questions, but perhaps the most interesting question of all is it ruining the genre? Is the fact that MMOs are becoming more and more of a solo experience contributing to the decline of the genre? I'm going to try to answer all of those questions today. In the early days of the MMO genre, you needed a group for just about everything, and even if you could solo something, getting a group was generally a lot faster and more efficient. If you played...
Is this... No, it's not. For a second, it almost looked like Lineage. Is that Lineage? Actually, no, it is Lineage, isn't it? Isn't this Lineage? Oh, God. Oh, God. Ugh. So let me tell you guys something, okay? Look, Lineage 2 is one of the few games that I regret having played. I regret having played Lineage 2. Yeah, that Lineage 2 was when I learned what a Korean grinder is. Which is basically that's what Lineage 2 is. It's a Korean grinder.
Generally a lot faster and more efficient. If you played an MMO back in the early 2000s, you probably had a pretty tight-knit circle, or at least a guild that you spent a lot of time with. You probably even remember a lot of those players today. They were people that became not just online acquaintances, but actual friends that you logged into the game for and grouped up with and ran through content together. It was just part of the game, and it was just what you did. And if you didn't, well, you wouldn't be getting a whole lot done, and you'd probably quit. Except players didn't quit. MMOs were never more popular than they were when they were forcing introverts to join guilds and get things done. When MMOs were hard...
See? Doesn't this say something? MMOs were at their peak popularity when they basically forced people to socially interact with one another rather than just having these single player quests. But you know, things have changed. People don't have as much time, yada, yada, yada. But I definitely feel like MMORPGs are at their best when they're being played multiplayer, not when you're soloing them.
Instead of easy. But today, the most popular MMOs seem to be designed around the player that is not interested in joining guilds, around the player that doesn't want to challenge in their questing experience. Dungeon finders, raid finders, not to mention the fastest way to level is usually what? It's the main story quest, which is almost entirely a solo experience carved straight through the MMO. We are at a point now where it's often less productive and less efficient to play our massively multiplayer games with other players. Grouping up used to be the fastest way to level, if not the only way to level. Battles were difficult, and it wasn't uncommon for there to be significant penalties for dying. You were all in it together. You actually needed each other, and every role in the group was incredibly important as a result. There was always a lot on the line, creating a lot of moments to bond with the players around you. If you survived that sketchy pull or managed to take the boss down, you'd celebrate. I still remember waiting for high-level healers to come res me in games like Lineage 2 to get hours of my experience back when we had died and lost it on death. I also remember actually having to use crowd control abilities to survive when someone in the group tab targeted the wrong enemy by accident.
Dude, I think we lose a lot by no longer doing crowd control in dungeons. I really do. I know that a majority of people didn't want to deal with crowd control. They're just like, no, pull everything, kill everything super fast, boom, 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 be done. I really enjoyed the days where you'd be like, no, let's actually, okay, you sleep this. It required more skill. Yeah, sap and sleep, exactly. Back in the Burning Crusade, you needed the CC or you would die. Yep. I mean, yeah, on High Mythic Plus, you do CC, yes, on High Mythic Plus, you do. But that's about it.
I miscalculated.
Everyone needed to be present and give it their all. But not just that, there was an incentive to bond with those players. There was an incentive to perform at your best. If you had a tank with clean pulls that could maintain aggro, or a healer that kept everyone standing, that was special. You remembered those players. You added them as friends, because that's the only way you would make sure you had a group to do that stuff with the next day. There wasn't a dungeon finder that you could queue into while watching Netflix and YouTube. You had to be social and you had to try. But don't get me wrong, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. If you think Tinder is hard on average looking nerds today, you should try being an average damage dealing DPS in the early 2000s. When tanks and healers logged into the game, they got swiped right on more than supermodels on Tinder. They were instantly messaged by desperate damage dealers begging for a group so they could actually leave town. But just like on Tinder, those tanks and healers swiped left on almost all those requests. They were already spoken for. They had already fallen.
True, dude. Hey, Ekalon, thank you very much for the raid, dude. Tip of the hat. How you doing, brother? Oh my God. Yeah, dude, tanks are spoken for. It feels good to be a tank. You know what I'm saying?
Into a static group. Desperate damage dealers had already locked them down. It was the best time to be a tank and a healer, and probably the worst time to be a damage dealer. But man, when you found that clique, a group that you look forward to logging in with and playing with every day, it was special. You'd shoot the breeze and comms while grinding through a dungeon until late in the night, knowing you'd all log back in the next day and maybe try out that new leveling spot.
Yeah, guys, for those of you that joined in from Akalon, welcome. We are watching a video right now from Lucky Ghost, which talks about how solo players save the genre. And up until this point, I've been saying that, like, man, I don't know about that. I kind of feel like MMOs were really fantastic when you kind of had to socially interact with other people, and it was more driven towards multiplayer experiences versus nowadays where every player is kind of like an island, you know?
Or that new dungeon that you were all finally high enough level to do.
By the way, when are you two going to have more podcast collabs? What do you mean? Podcast is every week. Oh, you mean off podcast? I mean outside the podcast. I don't know, dude. I've been having some pretty busy couple of weeks, but I'll see what I can do. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it last time.
But on the flip side, while some players were in that group making those memories, there were plenty of other players signing in just to realize they weren't going to get a group in time for it to be worth it, and they'd sign back out again after trying for sometimes hours. In other words, players were spending as much time looking for a group as they were being in a group. I remember standing in town looking for groups in Aiden and Lineage 2 or in Juno in Final Fantasy 11. I was a DPS in both games, and there were a lot of nights where I didn't get a group because I signed on too late due to school or work or life. And while I missed the camaraderie that came with forcing everyone to play together all the time, I don't miss that part of it. And even if you were one of the lucky ones that managed to form a static group, it only lasted so long. One person would level too fast, or one would level too slow, or one would go full Leroy Jenkins. And your odds of playing together the next day weren't great. But I'd take those odds right now because at the moment, indicators are suggesting that a recession is on the way, which brings me to the sponsor of today's video, Masterworks. Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, said that what's coming could be worse than a recession. So what are experts doing to prepare? They're following recently released guidance from BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, who says that a normal portfolio of stocks and bonds won't cut it anymore. For 2022 and beyond, BlackRock recommends diversifying with alternative assets. And of all the alternatives out there, only one was personally recommended by BlackRock's CEO, Larry Fink: contemporary art. Probably because contemporary art has outpaced the S&P 500 for the last 25 years by more than double, and it appreciates more than gold, real estate, and the S&P when inflation is high, at a whopping 33% annually. Repeating, of course. That's why I've partnered with Masterworks, because they're helping you secure your financial future by offering investments in the same contemporary art. This is not NFTs. This is fractional shares of actual paintings by legends like Picasso and Banksy. When Masterworks sells the paintings that you are invested in, you get a potential return. And the 6 paintings that they've sold so far have averaged a 29% net annual return, even through COVID, a bear market, and record high inflation. Now, of course, past performance is no guarantee of future results, but I think this is absolutely an option. Consider when diversifying your portfolio. With inflation still crazy high and stocks still crazy low, Masterworks is seeing a record demand. But you can skip the waitlist by clicking the link down in the description below. Thanks for listening, and let's get back to it. Okay, so like I was saying, it's nearly impossible for a group of people to sync their lives together in
I thought it was weird when he started talking about BlackRock. I was like, BlackRock? This is not a good thing.
way that would allow them to progress through an MMO at the exact same speed. And even if you did have a static group and you were committed to staying in that static group, there would be days where you couldn't play because that meant you would outlevel the people in the group. And there's the rub. That's the reason that MMOs focused on having a solid single player experience began their rise to dominance. If the MMO had a fleshed out enough solo experience, you always had something to do. If your friends weren't on, or if you didn't have any to begin with, you could still make great progress in the game. And this was a welcome change. And more than ever before, before, we're seeing MMOs focus on the solo experience all the way from early on in their development. Here's a clip from the recent Ashes of Creation developer update.
Ashes of Creation is looking to fulfill both that solo-oriented mind in gameplay, as well as the group and social experience.
WoW kind of started this, in my opinion. It had a very casual questing experience that would take you all the way through most of the game, but initially it lacked the Dungeon Finder. Later on, toward the end of the Wrath of the Lich King expansion, the Dungeon Finder was finally added. No longer were we walking to dungeons and forming groups in zone chat. We are now queued into an instance and tossed into a group that may or may not acknowledge each other's existence in group chat. We successfully got rid of boring hours of standing around looking for a group, but we also successfully got
I still feel like Guild Wars 2 has like the best balance of that. That's just my opinion on all of the ones that I've played so far. I've played I've played Ultima Online back in the day, not in the actual servers, but like in private servers. I've played World of Warcraft. I've played the original Guild Wars. Which the original Guild Wars, actually like the original Guild Wars more than Guild Wars 2 in a lot of ways. But that's neither here nor there. I played Guild Wars 2, Final Fantasy 14. Dude, I don't know. I've played so many different MMOs at this point that I don't even know. I've played a bunch of free-to-play ones as well. Like I've played Aeon when it actually released. I had like this Portuguese community that was playing Aeon. I played Lineage 2. I played a ton of MMOs. And in my opinion, if I had to choose one model for MMOs to kind of just like implement, it'd probably be the Guild Wars 2 model. In terms of the leveling, I'm not talking about the raids or stuff like that because I haven't done any raiding in Guild Wars 2. I'm just talking about open world leveling and activities. Because basically, it's just so organic the way in which you can go through a zone and the activities are all there and you can even like redo some of the activities, help your friends with the activities. Like it just like stuff feels more organic in that game in terms of level up and getting together and all of that. Do you remember like Runes of Magic? Oh, Runes of Magic was like the one that was pretty much a carbon copy of World of Warcraft. I definitely remember All Odds Online. There's like a video of me and Hengist playing All Odds Online. Because we had like this sponsorship deal that we did at some point. Yeah, I also played SWTOR. I played as a smuggler, played the entirety of the base game. I loved the smuggler storyline. But again, SWTOR was very much one of those examples where you're basically playing single player, let's be honest. You're basically playing single player most of the game. SWTOR was clearly a single-player game. It would have been a much better single-player game. I agree. I think they should have done it single. Maybe not even just single-player. I feel like it could have been a co-op game. What MMO was it you blew up the theater? That was in Ultima Online. It was in Ultima Online that I blew up the theater. with bombs. We butchered everybody in that theater. I mean, I've told this story before, but real quick, like it was like an RP event that they were doing, and it was really lame. So me and a friend, they wouldn't let people take weapons into the thing. So we go in there and we take reagents to make bombs using alchemy, and then we just like, as everybody's like enjoying their RP experience, which like I said was pretty lame, and the GMs of that server were trash anyway. And so you just start hearing the sweet sounds of mortal and pestle. Suck, 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 suck. And everybody's like, well, what's going on? And then suddenly you start seeing the numbers. 3, 2, 1. Boom! And everybody in the theater dies. But the best part was that the GMs threw us in jail with a bunch of other people, but they didn't take our things away from our inventories. So we killed everybody in jail too. Oh, that was so good. There's like a more detailed version where I talk about all of the things about these events in the Rurikhan Unleashed channel. If you're curious, just look like for Ultima Online or something in there, and you'll find it, where I go into great detail about the crazy adventures I had in Ultima Online. But yeah, that was That was some fun stuff.
Got rid of a ton of social interaction in the process. You don't need to make friends. You can just queue up for a dungeon when you want to, on your schedule. It didn't matter if you were great at the game or bad at it. You'd get tossed into a group all the same. There was a lot less social accountability. One inevitable downside to this, dungeon content began to be designed for these types of groups. Random groups of strangers were more prone to giving up on a group as soon as it was apparent it wasn't going to be a smooth dungeon experience. They knew they could simply queue up for a dungeon group later, and as a result, commitment to the group was lacking, and you couldn't have content as difficult as you used to. People just wouldn't stick around through the wipes. The solution was to make dungeon content easier. When's the last time you used a CC ability on an ad? No way. You pull that bad boy in and melt it down with everything else. Relying on players to CC mobs was tedious. It required communication. Cleaving it all down was easy. Everyone could be on the same page without even having to talk to each other. And I see this in almost every MMO. Dungeons are generally pretty easy. They generally don't require a lot of communication, and as a result, they often end up being pretty forgettable. You romp through it, you melt everything inside, and then you forget the people and the content that you experience. It'd now be fair to describe most MMORPGs as single-player games with some group content tacked onto the side. All of the biggest MMOs like Final Fantasy XIV, ESO, Guild Wars 2, World of Warcraft, they've all got tons and tons of solo content for you to do when you log in. Oftentimes, they have way more solo content than they do group content, and they've succeeded all the more.
Yeah, we talked about this, how last week I started playing World of Warcraft, and I played for like 2-3 days, whatever. And in those 2-3 days, there was no need for me to do any multiplayer content in this massively multiplayer online role-playing game at all. It was just single-player stuff, after single-player stuff after single. The one time where I did one multiplayer activity is because I strayed off of the beaten path that Blizzard laid in front of me, and I said, I'm going to go do an heroic. And I did an heroic, and that was it. And that was the multiplayer content that they did. It's like, I feel like there needs to be a balance where you kind of need, at a certain point, you need players to do things. And I feel like that balance hasn't really been struck in a lot of modern MMOs. Most of them are leaning much more towards the solo experience, the auto experience. Like, you can experience the entirety of Final Fantasy XIV without ever really talking to another human being. You can't experience like the harder level content, but you don't need to, because you get like the normal version of the raids and you can queue into that, and you can even suck and die and be left dead while 7 other people carry you through the encounter, because it's fairly easy. But, it's just one of those things. I wish that the balance was more skewed a little bit more towards the multiplayer and not all the way into single player as it is right now.
For it. Players have spoken silently and with their wallets. They gravitate towards the MMOs with a fleshed out solo experience. They want the option to group up on their schedule and not somebody else's, and sometimes they want the option to not have to group up at all. So this begs the question, why play MMOs at all if you're the person that doesn't want to interact with anyone at all? And it's a fair question, but I think it's the fact that MMOs are an unending story. They're not just about interacting with other people. They are about the journey, the days, the weeks, the months that we put into them. They'll be relevant for years. It always feels bad when you're watching a good show and you go to put on the next season only to find out there isn't one. The show got canceled years ago. Or maybe this calls for a more direct comparison, such as when you're enjoying a single player game and you have an epic fight and you get that bittersweet feeling because you know a final battle when you see one. It's epic, it gives closure, and you're completely aware of the fact that you're likely only a few lines of dialogue and maybe a cutscene away from putting the game down forever. The character you're leveling up, the skills you unlock, the cool cosmetics you found, you'll never see them again, nor will anyone else. You beat the game and you'll probably never boot it up. It's a conflicting moment of wow, that was amazing, and damn, it's over. And that's where MMORPGs come in. They don't end, or at least you hope they won't anytime soon. You don't have to walk away from the story.
I mean, they don't end is a very strong, that's a very strong statement right there. Sometimes they end.
And the character and the hero you leveled, you'll be jumping back onto it in the next expansion. There's also the fact that playing alone isn't always a conscious choice. It's not always a decision made through social anxiety. Sometimes it just happens that way. I don't consider myself a solo MMO player, but if I look back at my...
We have now reached the point where we have the insoles The involuntarily solo players. I'm sorry. That's probably a bad joke. Never mind.
Recent experiences in MMOs, I have a lot of time spent playing solo. It wasn't even a conscious decision I made, but my schedule fell out of sync with the people I tended to group with. I played the MMO for half the day and then maybe went to work on a YouTube video. The next day, they were levels ahead of me and it didn't make sense to group. Or on the flip side, I'd be the one degenning the MMO the way we MMO players sometimes do, and someone in the group would have work, a new girlfriend, a new kid, or school, and they'd fall out of sync. And there's one critical problem that's arisen with the new progression rates of MMOs today. Even though you're only a day or two behind your friends, you might as well be on a different server while you're leveling up. They're working on different dungeons, different zones, and they're grabbing different materials, and while of course completing completely different quests. Fortunately, once you hit max level, that problem mostly tends to fade away, but you have to get to max level first, and so few players do these days. Look at New Worlds. Look at Lost Ark. This is why it's so critical for games to have a solo-friendly leveling experience. As much as we all dream of jumping into an MMO with our friends and leveling through the whole thing together, life just gets in the way. Most of us have either school, jobs, significant others, or a family, or some combination of the four that require varying amounts of our time. So let's circle back to the question at the beginning of the video. MMOs were more popular than ever when they forced us to play together, when they lacked dungeon finders and raid finders. But these days, MMOs are often built with the solo player at the forefront of their design. Do MMOs attract fewer players because of this change, or do MMOs attract fewer players because we changed? WoW's population peaked at around 12 million current subscribers all the way back in 2010.
I think it's a combination of both. We have also changed, like people have changed as a whole, and nothing is more apparent when it comes to that. That like, imagine like 10 years ago, someone would tell you that one of the things that people do the most on the internet is watch like 10-second clips. Just watch 10 seconds of entertainment at a time. You're like, what? No. 10 years ago, probably most of us here in this chat be like, no, dude, 10 years from now, the video games are going to be so good. When in reality, the main source of entertainment for people nowadays is watching TikTok clips. TikTok is so incredibly popular, and just like look at what TikTok is. And I'm not just bringing up TikTok for the sake of, you know, a random example. Like there's a reasoning behind it. Look at the characteristics of TikTok. Extremely low commitment. Your commitment is anywhere from 10 to 30 seconds of time. That is the commitment that you have for the entertainment that you're presented to. The time that it takes to form a group in an MMO to do a specific type of content is going to be anywhere from like 10 minutes to 30 minutes to an hour to 2 hours. You know, it can be really long. And it's like when you're considering that to just like, oh, I can just look at TikTok and get entertainment in like 30 seconds, boom, just like swipe. And it's like that stuff fucks with your attention span. And it's like we've been gradually leading more towards less and less commitment to things, which is, you know, not conducive to good MMORPG experiences. Digital fear of commitment. Yeah, it's no longer just a relationship thing. It's now also, you know, gotten thrown into video games as well. By the way, I think I missed Joseph FX Killer. I'm sorry. Thank you very much for becoming grossly incandescent, Joseph. Tip of the hat. Appreciate the support. Thank you. I'm sorry. I was like so into the whatever the hell I was doing. I missed that.
On the decline since, and no other MMO has even come close to reaching its concurrent player base. Why is that? Is it due to switching the focus to the solo experience? I don't think so. The most successful MMOs today have the best solo content. I think we changed, so the MMOs had to follow suit. We were once okay with standing in town for an hour looking for a group. It was all new and shiny, this whole going online and grouping with people from around the world. Most players had never really experienced that before, but the novelty wore off. The excitement of being able to log into a game and play it with other people wasn't new anymore and no longer outweighed the disappointment of standing in town looking for a group. And not only that, every week new online games were popping up that could also satisfy that same online desire. The only difference is they had you in a match in 5 minutes. Today, being subjected to an hour-long wait in town, trying to form a party in zone chat is a quit moment for most players. There's too many other options now, too many other multiplayer games that will have you in a match in an instant. Some say MMOs are dead as a result, and I don't agree with that. that, recent MMO launches have been insane. There are still millions of players looking for and hoping for an MMO to grab them the way that the genre once did. You saw it twice in the last year, with millions showing up for the launches of New World and Lost Ark. Neither of those games held on to all of their players, but there were a lot of reasons for that prevent those games from being indicators of a dead genre. Lost Ark's pay-to-win nature ensures that it will only ever see limited success here in the West, despite actually being a solid game. And New World, it came out of the oven half-baked. It wasn't finished, but it's now making the same pivot the rest of the major MMOs did after their launches. It's hard focusing on that solo experience. It's completely revamped and
it's like, but look at the problems that we have in the genre. Constantly. MMORPGs are coming out half-baked. Like, all the goddamn time. I mean, I know that we also have this problem in other genres, but Jesus Christ, if in the MMORPG is not so much worse than any other genre. Like, look at New World. What if they had waited for 1 year, one more year, if they have given New World 1 more year, it wasn't going to hold on to 1 million concurrents, but it could be at like 500,000. Which would be 10 times more popular than it is now at the current release of a brand new expansion. Give or take. I don't know. I saw earlier that Brian tweeted the numbers and it was like 50-something thousand. So it's like, why can't these companies just understand that, like, if we just release it right, if we just release it when it's done, you know, if we could just release the game when it's ready. I feel like a new MMORPG that would just release feature complete. I'm not talking about like everything is flawless, but just like feature complete. Sure, have a couple of bugs here and there, whatever, but just be feature complete. If an MMO was able to launch feature complete, it would get so many people to play it simply on the fact that it is done. The fix-it-later culture is the worst thing that happened to gaming. Yeah. They don't want because they can make money. Knowing they will make money, look at the RTX. Wait, is the RTX 490 actually sold out? People are so fucking stupid. They have more money than brains. I swear to God. If the 490 is sold out, people have more money than brains. People will continue to get abused by fucking corporations. Good job.
Fleshed out its questing experience so that you can follow a main quest chain all the way through the game. It also added a dungeon finder. It's realized that these are the things that most MMO players crave these days.
Wait a minute. The dungeon finder in New World is not the same dungeon finder that we have in World of Warcraft. Dungeon Finder in World of Warcraft, you hit the button, boom, teleport me to dungeon, go. Dungeon Finder in New World, you actually have to form a group. It's basically like, it's like the group finder in World of Warcraft. It's not actually a dungeon finder as much as it's a group finder for a specific dungeon, and it is not automatic. Like, everything requires a player action in order to form a group. Yeah, it's like Party Finder in Final Fantasy XIV, like Lionheart just said.
For New World, in anticipation of all this new content, combined with its new zone and new weapon, its player base is up 40% in the last 30 days. Wait, scratch that. I just refreshed the page. Make that 46% in the last 30 days. Looks like their focus on the players without friends is starting to pay off. So has the soloification of MMOs ruined the genre? I don't think so. The developers didn't make MMOs solo. We did, by gravitating towards the MMO that offered the stronger solo experiences. When I'm playing MMOs, most of my time is spent doing what I want to do. When I want to do it, I am literally one of the players taking advantage of the solo experience MMOs are now adding. I frequently tune into Asmongold, who has millions of people that would love to play with him, and see him doing the same thing. Whether it's farming mounts in WoW or grinding up his gathering levels in New World, he's also taking advantage of the solo opportunities. I think it's because it's nice to be able to go at your speed. Sometimes you just want a solo chill activity. When you're a content creator trying to keep up with chat, or a dad trying to keep up with children, or students trying to keep up with class, the flexibility of having the solo content to dive into on those nights where you only have an hour or your friends aren't available, it makes all the difference when you're deciding what game to boot up. And as history shows, when one game offered the experience of standing in town trying to form a group and another offered anything else, we gravitated towards anything else. And worded like that, it's not so surprising, is it? I think the best thing MMOs can do now is have a ton of solo content waiting for us when we need it, and a ton of group content waiting for us when we want it. And that's the big difference. A lot of times when you're doing the solo content, it's because you need it. It's because there isn't really an option to do the group content at the moment because you don't have people available to do it, or you don't have the time to do it. In conclusion, solo content didn't ruin the genre, it kept it relevant. We're just not willing to stand around town for hours at a time looking for groups anymore. There's too many other online games that can put us into a game instantly. What type of player are you?
It's like he's talking about having to sit in town.
So grossly incandescent.
Lionheart Ren, thank you very much for becoming grossly incandescent. Tip of the hat. Appreciate the support. It's like he's talking about sitting in town, spamming like, oh, looking for 2 more, looking for 1 more, blah, blah, blah. You guys get the idea. Some of you probably did this in World of Warcraft or even in other MMOs. But like, you don't have to you don't need to go, you either sit in town or spam LFM, or you press 1 button and it queues you into a dungeon. Like, I feel like there's a middle ground, and party finders and group finders and refining those systems, I feel, is the way to go, rather than just completely removing more and more group content, which is why I kind of agree with what he said. These games need both a ton of solo content and a ton of group content. It needs to be both. And the thing is, it also needs to be done in a way where you can very quickly switch between the two. Because in a lot of games, doing one conditions your ability to do the other. So, for instance, in order for you to do a lot of the things that you want to do in Final Fantasy XIV, it requires you to do a lot of things that you have to do solo ahead of it. You need to have more of these solo activities to also be able to be done in a group. So, like, for instance, there's no reason why Final Fantasy XIV scenarios can't be done with more than 1 player, in my opinion, because it's not like, oh, these scenarios are super challenging, that it's meant to be a challenge of the player's skill. No, and you can kind of like scale things up if there's more players involved with the quest as well. But even if you don't, it's not really that big of a deal. It can be the player's choice. And you can even give them warning. Hey, if you bring somebody with you into this quest, it's going to be easy, whatever. But like, that was one of the things that really kind of like was weird to me when I first started playing 14, was like how these scenarios you can't be played with anybody. So if somebody starts playing the game fresh, you can party with them for some things, but not the scenarios. The scenarios need to be experienced solo, which is, you know, I feel like there needs to be a little bit more integration between what is a solo activity, what is a multiplayer activity, which is why I keep bringing up Guild Wars too, because I feel like they do a good job of that.
Are you the solo player or the group player, or a little of both? If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe for more MMO content and to help out with Algorithm Senpai. I appreciate it. And if you agree or disagree, let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear your take on it. This is just my opinion. These are just my ramblings, so you're certainly welcome to disagree. And as always, a massive shout out to my YouTube members. Thank you so much for joining and helping support the channel so that I can continue to make the best content possible for you guys. And if you ever want to hang out with someone else that loves MMOs, be sure to swing by my Twitch stream over at twitch.tv/luckyghost. And if you don't have any plans, maybe check out one of the videos popping up on screen right now.
All right, that was pretty good. That was a pretty good video. I like this guy's videos a lot. He puts a lot of effort in his videos for sure. Guys, please do make sure, check it out. Hit the like button. I'm actually going to subscribe. I wasn't subscribed yet. This was the second video I saw from him. Subscribe if you enjoy it. And also make sure to give it some watch time. Don't just like and leave, because that is actually bad for the algorithm.